Hello Popcorn Junkies, welcome to this review of a British movie set in Scotland called I Swear, directed by Kirk Jones, director of, amongst other things, Waking Ned and Nanny McPhee. This is a film based upon the real life story of John Davidson. And John Davidson was a young boy who was diagnosed with Tourette syndrome and then went on to become a sort of advocate for and campaigner for a better understanding of Tourette's and its implications, its impact on family, on self, on your social status, getting work, things like that. So this is a quintessentially British film. It stars Maxine Peake. Absolutely adored her in that recent series Say Nothing, set within the troubles of Northern Ireland. She's a sensational actress. It also stars Shirley Henderson, Peter Mullan, but also starring Robert Aramayo playing the titular, well, it's not titular as he's not in the title, but he plays John Davidson. And Robert Aramayo, you might recognise, I think he was in some of the Game of Thrones series way back, but he was also, I think, an elven king in the Rings of Power, the Amazon Prime Lord of the Rings series. So this is a film about Tourette's. It's a kind of, from his childhood through his grown-up life, all the way up to him being given an MBE by the Queen. And what's quite neat is the film's bookended with him arriving for his MBE ceremony. He's got the tick. You're thinking, oh my God, will he swear? What's going on? And then we go back in time to John Davidson as a young boy. And really, this is, if I'm honest, it's not the kind of thing I'm necessarily drawn to. I'm interested in Tourette's. I'm interested in it as a neurodiverse condition, if it is a neurodiverse condition. I was interested in it, getting to understand the implications of it on a young man growing up, the bullying, the fitting in, the having girlfriends, the getting jobs, his relationship with his mum and all that kind of stuff. So I was really curious to know about it. We also have experience in our family. We know family friends who themselves have struggled and lived under the pressure, really, of Tourette's. And I think when I sat down to watch this, I was kind of thinking I knew what I was going to get. I thought, this is going to be a sort of potentially not lectury, but kind of on-the-nose British social commentary docudrama about a subject, rather than necessarily being a really well-drawn, character-driven, nuanced, emotional, thought-provoking kind of film. I think sometimes films that are about something, or about a mental health condition, or about a social condition or a social issue, that can become the tail that wags the dog. And in a sense, in pursuit of the topic or the theme or the issue, the details of characterization, into the interconnection of characters, story arc, and just the richness of storytelling can sometimes get lost beneath the weight of sort of getting a message, getting the message across. So if I'm honest, I sat down slightly concerned that might be what we were going to get here. We sit for a couple, for the first almost act of the film, we are with the young John Davidson living in Galashiels, Scottish family, hard knocks, tough dad, playing football, clearly has a skill in goal. And then suddenly, just gradually, a sort of tick kicks in. His relationship with his dad, like so many boys with their dad. Sometimes when I worry about whether I could have benefited from knowing who my dad was, I then look at young boys and their relationship with their dads and think, whoa, maybe I had a lucky escape sometimes. So he has a relationship with his dad. His dad's interested in him and sort of is into him when he's potentially going to play for a Scottish football team. But when he then starts to develop these tics, it gets in the way of him being able to... Well, actually, what happens is he has the tics. It's misread and misinterpreted at school as bad behaviour and being rude and being insolent. And he gets given, I remember that, he got whipped on the hand with a belt by his headmaster. And it meant that in goal, he couldn't quite save the ball because his hands were all kind of, sensitive and hurting. And I'm presuming this is based on the true story of the guy, John Davidson. And that's heartbreaking because he was clearly quite tasty and quite handy in goal. So you see him move through school. He's characterized as badly behaved. His dad doesn't understand. His mum, brilliantly played by Shirley Henderson. She's fantastic actress. Very sort of tiny, sort of wizened, but kind of, she's always like a tiny bird. And she's a bit, she's harsh. I mean, I don't know if it's Presbyterian, is it? She's harsh on him. It's a harsh existence, for John. He's in a family. He's got sisters and brothers, and his dad is just kind of only interested in the football. And then when his dad realizes that essentially John is I'm not saying this, but his dad considers him to be damaged goods, or just strange, or just rude, or just weird. His dad loses interest and literally leaves the family, which is heartbreaking. So the young John Davidson it's a heartbreaking tale of being sort of feeling ostracized, feeling outside of things. He goes on a date with a girl in his class, which I thought was really funny. It was a really neat, nostalgic moment. In fact, the soundtrack in this film, or something about this film that's really neat, is it does take you straight back to the 1980s and the soundtrack of the 80s, the soundtrack of the early 90s. You know, we had Blue Monday, I think, playing by New Order, and he goes on a date, and the woman, the mother of the daughter, doesn't trust him and sort of goes into the cinema too. It's quite funny. A lovely kind of nostalgia of the old adverts, a whole list, you know, the Flake advert, another advert, all the Capirlindine and all that. But he has a tick, and he has a moment alongside this girl that he's on a date with, and it's misread, or maybe it was kind of like quite fumbled and quite quick. Maybe he sort of felt he did make a move on her or something, but something happened to make her jump. The mother jumped, so everything goes wrong for him as a young boy, and so consequently he's characterized as badly behaved, naughty. His prospects aren't good. You know, he's kind of shunned. He's sat outside of things. He's going to be expelled from the school. He can't help but call the headmaster a cunt. It was a time when it was misunderstood. And I thought that whole section of the film was really neatly kind of portrayed, because I remember the 80s. I was at school. I was around the same age as this guy. I remember at that time. In fact, I think I saw the documentary. We'd all run around. We'd just laugh about, whoa, imagine if you just swear. Imagine if you... And I think what became apparent quite early on in this film was actually the compulsion to say things at the wrong time. And I have to be honest, I don't have Tourette's, but I do have this strange compulsion. I don't know if it's a byproduct of ADHD, where if I know I shouldn't say something, I feel I have to say something. It's a kind of compulsive or impulsive behavior to test the boundaries of things. And I find it really curious still within this film, and it's a curious detail of Tourette's. The very thing you might be worried about someone thinking of you, you start shouting or saying yourself. So it's like if if the police come for some reason and you start to say, there's a moment in this where he says, I killed him. Well, he didn't kill whoever he's talking about. But, you know, the fact that he's saying it, you can see how it leads to real confusion for those around the Tourette sufferer, trying to work out, well, what the fuck's happened here? She's cold, Shirley Henderson, as his mum, but she's also, you can see she's troubled. You can see she just lacks the emotional 360 degrees. She doesn't have the openness, but that isn't necessarily a criticism of her as a mum. That was just the era. I mean, you know, we come from the era, as does every era before mine, of you just grew up, and if you had a problem, you just shut up. You just got on with it. You know, there wasn't a lot of kind of, you know, analysing of emotions and all this kind of stuff. And then what we discover is that as John is older, and he's now played by Robert Aramayo. You know, we have a sort of process. We've moved through time. He's still living with his mum. He's a grown man. He's full of energy. He's full of tics. They're going shopping. He can't help but swear, and he's constantly, you know, he's ticking all the time. And he bumps into an old friend, and then bumping into his old friend, he goes back to his old friend's home, and he meets Maxine Peake, who plays Dottie. And she's great. She's just lovely. She's a kind of psychiatric nurse of some form, and she just gives him permission to be different. She gives him permission in a safe place, in a safe space, to have his tics. And what I think she picks up, and I think presumably this must have happened in his life, is what almost fuels the Tourette's or fuels the tics is a sense that you're going to offend someone, or that you're expected to behave in a certain way. And so as soon as you're given permission to just be yourself, there isn't the stress, there isn't the anxiety, and then the tics, not that the tics don't happen or the Tourette's doesn't happen, but it seems less inclined to erupt and cause upset and distress because he's not as stressed. So I thought it was interesting watching this film. And so you could be forgiven for thinking, oh, this sounds like a real film just about... It is about Tourette's, but what's so brilliant about it, as I sat and watched it, it's a really, really authentic, emotional, funny. It didn't shy away from really indulging in the humour and funniness around Tourette's and a neurodiversity, if you like. There are moments where it's traumatic, it's stressful, It's distressing for him. He becomes exhausted. He's tired. He can't go into certain spaces. He can't be intimate because he's worried forever that he's going to tick and he's going to fire off. When he goes out for a drink with his new mate, he gets beaten up. He gets into a fight. His because I didn't realize it can also manifest itself not just in a tick and a sort of swear word or saying stuff that you just shouldn't say, but really quite strong, violent physical lunges. And there's a moment where he hits Maxine Peake in the face and he goes to hit Peter Mullan in the crutch and what have you. So, there's a lot in here about the social dilemma of trying to fit in, the social dilemma of getting a job. But again, it's not all about the message. It's all done very naturalistically. And even though this is based on a real life story, the richness of the relationships, the richness of the connections, the richness of everyone working everyone else out was so lovely to watch. Peter Mullan coming to terms with Robert Aramayo's, as John, trying to work out what was right, what was wrong, what he could cope with and deal with and relate to and deal with as his potential employer, this is, as a caretaker. That's really nice. Maxine Peake trying to work out just where his vulnerabilities lay and what was stressing him out. And so it was actually a really comforting film to watch about the potentiality of people being kind but not being soppy. Maxine Peake isn't soppy. Peter Mullan isn't soppy. There's a moment where John Davidson, Robert Aramayo, hits his dog with a tick. He has a tick and he hits the dog, and Peter Mullan says, "Don't you do that again. I'll fucking smash your face in." Clear boundaries. And so there was a great balance in this. There was an inherent stress to every situation because you so inhabited the fear and the worry and the distress, if you like, that Robert Aramayo's character was going through in every scene that was in. You were thinking, oh, please don't say, if it bursts out now, you're going to cause offence. If it bursts out now, you're going to get told off, or you're going to get taken in by the police, or you're going to get into a fight and all this kind of stuff. He does end up in a cell and all this kind of stuff. And although, again, even though this is a kind of, if you like, a sort of rags to riches sort of tale, because he goes through the horror, he goes through the hell, he goes through the alienation, he gets a job, very intimate, meaningful kind of camaraderie and bromance between him and Peter Mullan, beautifully played, naturalistically played. I have to just say at this point, Robert Aramayo is absolutely sensational. I mean, after I watched the film, I so didn't recognize him from the Rings of Power. I so believed that maybe he had Tourette's. Maybe it's so authentically played. I mean, it's staggeringly nuanced and detailed, and you just he must have studied and studied and studied this because it was so real. He so inhabited it. But his connection with Peter Mullan was so meaningful, was so heartfelt, was so lovely. And there is a catastrophic moment that happens to Peter Mullan's character at one point. And you see Robert Aramayo play that interior upset and distress, and yet his Tourette's is still coming out. I don't want to ruin the scene, but stuff's coming out of his mouth that potentially could incriminate him, and it's just he can't just help it coming out, and so you realise that Tourette's is about stress, it's about compulsion, it's about impulsivity, it's about not being relaxed in an environment and that tripping you and stressing you out, and he lives under extraordinary anxiety all the time, and it's just a really kind of but at the same time, what comes out of his mouth is so fucking funny. I mean, it must be hard to not just let your Tourette's run riot when I would find being around the original guy that Robert's playing, John Davidson, I just find it fucking hysterical. And it really is at times, it's really hysterical. His relationship with Maxine Peake is lovely because, of course, she provides a maternal figure to him that he can't get from his mum. There's an incredibly intense scene where Shirley Henderson and Maxine Peake meet in the street, and you can see the loss, but also you could see in Shirley Henderson's character, his mum, this sense that she knew he possibly had found somewhere that he needed better than she could provide for him. So she kind of in her own way was recognizing her limitations. But I thought that was neat because that's just obviously what happened in his life with his relationship with his mum. There was an estrangement, there was a distance, there was that sort of Presbyterian austerity to her towards him, which of course again was a hangover from just not understanding. She'd have just found, what the fuck's wrong with my boy? What's wrong with him? You know, he used to, when he was a kid, he was put in front of the fire and he'd spit his food, you know, he'd tick and spit his food everywhere. So he was made to sit in front of the fire and spit into the fireplace. So there were, again, even where there were moments of real sadness, when I said to Nadia, oh, you've got to see this film, she said, oh no, but it looks so sad. In a weird way, maybe the trailer does it a disservice, because there is sadness in there, because there's sadness with anyone having a condition. But this really is a film that really, really relishes and enjoys taking us through the sadness of his isolation, alienation, and then him kind of conquering that and becoming someone who gives so much back. And then that rags to riches aspect kicks in, where he becomes an advocate and a campaigner almost for, and he creates kind of Tourette syndrome kind of conferences, which he has even the grace to say at one point, what kind of a mad fucking idea is this? And you've got a scene, beautiful scene, where I'm guessing most of the kind of extras or people in the scene were genuine families and genuine people with Tourette's, the sound and the noise and everything going on. And there was a beautifully observed scene between him talking, him sort of having a moment outside of this group, talking with this girl who he was introduced to. And she was introduced to him in a car, and he's got, she's got Tourette's. And there's this fantastic scene in the back of a car where they're trying to connect with each other, and they're both ticking and Tourette'sing and saying really horrible stuff to each other. And it's like rapid machine gun fire between the two of them. It's brilliant. It's hysterical. It must have been kind of, if not ad-libbed. I think the girl was perhaps just really in her Tourette's. I think she was a real Tourette's person with Tourette's, and I think he just kind of riffed and came off the back of that, and it was a really rich scene. And then off the back of their kind of sparring, if you like, there's a calmer scene where the Tourette's, again, the tics have lessened because they feel comfortable with each other, and then they just share about the reality of them having this thing around the neck that they have to bite into, and she has a different thing that she bites into, and he has this leather strap that he has to bite into to stop the compulsion to kind of keep saying stuff and hitting stuff and flicking at things and hitting things. I thought this was a really, really beautiful film. I laughed, I cried, and it didn't fall into the trap for me of being a really kind of, worthy. It wasn't worthy at all. It was irreverent. It was a bit punk rock and roll. And that was partly helped also by Robert Aramayo. He's got such a striking face. In fact, I was thinking as I was watching this, if a drama is ever made about Quentin Tarantino's life, Robert Aramayo has to play him. He's got the perfect face for it. He's every minute that he's on screen, he's so eminently watchable. His energy is so, you feel affectionate towards him, and you're, as I say, you're entertained. And then we build to this astonishing moment, which again is quite documentary-esque, because I think it's based on real research, where he goes to this university, they're testing out new technology which is designed to silence the tics or calm the tics, and he wears it. It's a sort of, I don't know what it is, it's almost like a Fitbit watch, but with kind of a magnetic thing in it. And one of the things he says, a place that he's never been able to go because of his tics is a library. And I thought of my mum with this. She was a librarian, and he's doing a sort of trial on this strap thing, and he puts it on. And there's this wonderful sequence where he walks into this library in the university, and he has no tics, and he has no compulsions, and he walks around and he looks at things, and the silence of that scene was beautifully played, and was just a beautiful juxtaposition and contrast with the rest of the film, which understandably is very busy and quite stressy and quite intense. And then he comes back and sits down with the woman who's devised the technology, and he says, "Can't I just keep this?" She said, "Not yet. You can take it home for a couple of days." But she said, "What was it like?" And he says, "I just didn't feel anxious. I just didn't have the hum and for anyone with a mental health condition or a neurodiversity, this idea that you could silence that hum or silence the noise or calm the anxiety, I really felt that. You really feel this, and Robert Aramayo really captured that moment of quietude and ease and calm. So I loved this film. I just thought it was absolutely fantastic. It was real, it was raw, it was empowering, but it wasn't gloopy and it wasn't worthy. Maxine Peake, beautifully played, beautifully played, tender, sensitive, funny, witty. They end up going, we cut back, the film's bookended with him back getting his MBE. I think he does say "fuck the Queen" or something ridiculous. He does actually swear at the Queen or something. Apparently it's quite famous. Shirley Henderson, sensational. Peter Mullan, beautiful, tender, real caretaker man with a heart of gold, but he can see the potential in Robert Aramayo. You know, he gets him through a court case, which is really nice. And Robert Aramayo at the center of this film is sensational. He has to be nominated for a BAFTA. I know it's not all about fucking awards or something. They don't really mean that much, but they do mean something, don't they? He has to be nominated for a BAFTA. I thought it was a really beautiful film. And it's one of those films, I think it's at 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, deservedly so. It's just great entertainment. I loved every minute of it. And if there's one film I would really recommend you hunt out at the cinema to go and see, it's I Swear. You want it at the cinema as well. Whilst it's not overtly cinematic, you know, it's like one of the things with a lot of British films is it's not particularly widescreen and big. Robert Aramayo in such size is sensational to watch, and you get a real kind of visceral sense of the Tourette's. And prepare yourself, you will laugh a lot, even though you're asking yourself, should I be laughing? It's a bit like that dating show with people, neurodiverse people. You never know whether you should be laughing, but there's great charm, and there's great beauty in the humour, and the gallows humour almost to be found. So if I was to score this, I'd give this, 100 out of 100. I thought it was sensational.